My father threw a barbecue to celebrate kicking me out. I pulled up to grab my last box and saw a huge banner over the garage. "Goodbye, Freeloader. Don't come back." My uncle was wasted screaming from the patio. 30 years old and no career. Your poor mother would be ashamed to see you bleed us dry. My brother threw a hot dog at my car. "There's your last free meal, loser." Even the kids were laughing and pointing. I didn't react. Grabbed my box. Walked back to my car. Took a photo of that banner with everyone partying underneath. 2 weeks later. "Brother. Talk now." "Uncle. Buddy, I was drunk. I didn't mean any of it." "Dad. Call me back. Please. I'm begging you." Before I tell you exactly how their entire reality collapsed and how I legally dismantled the lie they built their lives on, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Thank you for being here. Grab a cup of warm coffee, sit down, and listen to me tell the whole story. My name is Matthew. I am 30 years old. The day my father decided to celebrate throwing me out of his house, he treated it like he was hosting a neighborhood block party. I pulled my Honda Civic into the driveway of my childhood home on a blistering Saturday afternoon. The heat radiating off the asphalt was thick, but it was nothing compared to the suffocating atmosphere waiting for me. I was only there to grab the very last cardboard box of my belongings from the laundry room. As my tires crunched against the gravel, the loud, booming sound of country music hit my ears. The air was heavy with the smell of charcoal, burning meat, and cheap beer. I put the car in park and looked up. Stretched completely across the two-car garage, fastened tightly with industrial grommets, was a massive vinyl banner. The letters were bright, aggressive red. They read, "Goodbye, Freeloader. Don't come back." There were easily 24 people in the front yard and spilling onto the driveway. Neighbors I had mowed lawns for, extended family members, people I had known my entire life. They were holding red plastic cups, laughing, and pointing openly at my car. From the patio, a loud, slurred voice cut right through the music. It was my Uncle Carter. "There's your last free meal, loser," Elijah yelled, high-fiving one of his college buddies. Even the neighbors' kids, children who didn't even understand what the word freeloader meant, were giggling and pointing at me. I stepped out of the car. I didn't say a word. I didn't raise my hands defensively. I just walked straight up the driveway. Standing right in the center of the chaos, manning the grill, was my father, Robert. He was wearing an apron that literally said, "Boss of the Grill." He looked at me, spread his arms wide as if welcoming an audience to a comedy show, and smirked. He didn't tell Carter to shut up. He didn't scold Elijah for throwing food at my car. His silence was an absolute endorsement. He was proud of this spectacle. Next to him stood his wife, my stepmother Sarah. She was holding a glass of white wine, her lips curled into a tight, satisfied smile. She had been waiting for this day for years to secure the house and the inheritance solely for her precious Elijah. I walked past all of them. I felt the heat of their stares burning the back of my neck. I went into the house, walked down the familiar hallway to the laundry room, and picked up the last banker's box. It contained a few old winter coats and a framed picture of my late mother. I walked back out. The music was still blaring. The jokes were still flying. I set the box down on the hood of my car. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the camera app. I stepped back and framed the perfect shot. The massive red banner, my father flipping burgers beneath it, my uncle drinking, my brother laughing. I pressed the button. My father saw me do it. He pointed his metal spatula at me. "What are you doing?" "Collecting evidence for your therapist." I looked him dead in the eye. My heart was pounding against my ribs, but my voice was completely steady. "No, for later." I got in my car, put it in reverse, and drove away. I didn't cry. I didn't feel broken. I felt a cold, deep clarity. What they didn't know as they cheered my departure was that they had just cheered the end of their own survival. They thought they were kicking out a parasite. They had no idea they had just violently amputated their own life support system. The version of the story my family told the neighbors was simple, clean, and incredibly humiliating. It was the exact kind of story suburban folks love to gossip about over the fence because it makes them feel vastly superior about their own parenting. According to my father, I was a 30-year-old failure. I was a man whose fiancée, Chloe, had called off our wedding 3 years ago because I supposedly lacked ambition and refused to chase a corporate promotion. I was a guy who sat in a dark bedroom all day tapping on a laptop, contributing absolutely nothing to society, and forcing my aging father to keep a roof over my head. That story played very well at church gatherings and neighborhood block parties. It got my father a lot of sympathetic pats on the back. People loved telling him that tough love works and that kicking me out was exactly what I needed to finally become a real man. But the truth was a completely different beast. It was messier, quieter, and deliberately hidden by the very man who claimed to be my victim. 3 years ago, my life was actually going fine. I lived in an apartment downtown. I was working as a freelance operations consultant and bid coordinator. But then Chloe left me. It was a messy, painful breakup. Right around that same time, I got a panicked phone call from my father late on a Tuesday night. His company, Bennett Custom Signage, was drowning. My father built the company from the ground up 20 years ago. They manufactured and installed large commercial signs for businesses around the city. From the outside, it looked like a solid, blue-collar American success story. My father drove a brand new heavy-duty truck. He bragged about his revenue at the golf course. Behind closed doors, the business was completely bleeding out. Supply costs had skyrocketed. He had mismanaged a massive commercial project, resulting in thousands of dollars in penalties. His bookkeeper had quit out of pure frustration because he kept mixing personal expenses with company funds. He was staring down the barrel of total bankruptcy. He begged me to come home. He told me he just needed me there for a few months to help him organize his files because he wasn't good with computers. I was grieving my relationship. I was vulnerable. I packed up my apartment, broke my lease, and moved back into my old childhood bedroom to help the man who raised me. I thought I was going to organize a few spreadsheets. What I found was a financial crime scene. The company was surviving week to week on fumes and bluffing. And my father did what he always did when things got ugly. He got louder. He blamed younger workers, he blamed lazy customers, the economy, regulations, and eventually he blamed me, never himself. My father respected only one type of work: physical labor. If you weren't wearing steel-toed boots, carrying a heavy tool belt, and coming home covered in sawdust or grease, you weren't really working. Because I worked remotely on a laptop, organizing data and managing logistics, he genuinely believed I was just playing around on the internet all day. He would walk past my bedroom, see me typing furiously, and mutter loudly to himself, "Must be nice to sit in the air conditioning playing video games while the rest of us break our backs." He had absolutely no idea that while he was mocking my job, I was the only thing keeping his company from sinking to the bottom of the ocean. The first month I moved back, I fixed his invoicing system. He had tens of thousands of dollars floating out there in unpaid invoices because he simply forgot to bill people. I hunted down the clients, threatened collections, and brought the cash flow back to life. The second month, I discovered he hadn't paid his commercial liability insurance in 90 days. If one of his installers dropped a heavy metal sign on a pedestrian, he would have lost the business and his home in the resulting lawsuit. I used my own credit card to reinstate the policy immediately so his crews could legally keep working. I became the invisible garbage man of Bennett Custom Signage. I cleaned up every single mess he made without ever taking the credit. I handled Wyatt, his primary acrylic and metal supplier. Wyatt hated my father because my father was arrogant and always paid late. Wyatt was about to cut the company off completely. I spent hours on the phone with Wyatt, negotiating payment plans, apologizing for my father's abrasive behavior, and building a bridge of trust. Wyatt only kept shipping materials because I personally guaranteed the payments. I handled Aaron, the lead installer. Aaron was a good guy with a newborn baby at home. There were 3 separate Fridays where my father simply didn't have the cash to make payroll because he had taken Sarah on an expensive weekend trip. Aaron was going to quit. I quietly transferred my own freelance earnings into Aaron's bank account and told him it was a payroll system glitch. I paid the man's salary out of my own pocket so the company wouldn't lose its best worker. And then there was Cameron. Cameron was my father's biggest competitor in the city. Cameron was younger, sharper, and actively trying to steal my father's biggest client. Mr. Lincoln, the city's urban development director. Mr. Lincoln was a stickler for details. My father submitted a bid for a massive municipal project that was full of typos, incorrect math, and expired permits. Cameron's bid was flawless. I stayed awake for 48 hours straight. I completely rewrote my father's proposal. I generated 3D mock-ups. I formatted the compliance documents. I submitted it under the wire. We won the contract. It brought in $80,000 of pure profit. When the acceptance email came in, my father printed it out, walked into the kitchen, and showed it to Uncle Carter. "See," my dad boasted. "Old school relationships. Lincoln knows I'm the best in town. Nobody cares about fancy paperwork." I was sitting right there at the kitchen table, drinking black coffee to stay awake. He didn't even look at me. The worst part of living in that house wasn't the total lack of gratitude. The worst part was the relentless financial drain. Because my father refused to acknowledge my work as actual employment, he certainly wasn't paying me a salary for the hours I spent saving his business. I was doing all of this for free, working late into the night while trying to juggle my actual freelance clients just to keep my own bank account alive. But it went much deeper than unpaid labor. Over those 3 years, I slowly became the family's secret ATM. Every time the company's software subscriptions were about to lapse, my credit card was the one on file. Every time a city permit fee needed to be expedited so a crew could start digging, I paid it. I was terrified that if the business failed, my father would lose the house, and the stress would destroy him. Then there was the rest of the family. Uncle Carter was a chronic alcoholic who bounced from job to job. He lost custody of his kids years ago because he couldn't keep his life together. Every other week, he would call me with a pathetic sob story about his truck payment or his rent. "Just spot me 100, buddy. I'll pay you back on the first." He never paid me back. If I said no, he would go complain to my father, and my father would yell at me for not helping family in need. Then there was Elijah. My father and Sarah treated Elijah like absolute royalty. They set up a massive college fund for him, which he blew through in 2 semesters before dropping out to become an influencer. Elijah drove a leased sports car that my father paid for. Elijah would constantly text me for money to cover his bar tabs or his designer clothes. If I refused, Sarah would step in. Sarah was a master manipulator. She never yelled. She operated entirely in whispers. I would hear her in the kitchen late at night, pouring wine for my father, whispering poison directly into his ear. "Robert, honey, you work so hard," she would say softly. "And Matthew just sits there. He's 30. It's embarrassing. Our friends are asking questions. You need to be strong. Elijah needs that bedroom for his streaming setup. You have to push Matthew out of the nest. For his own good." She wrapped her greed in the clever disguise of maternal concern. She wanted me gone so there would be no competition for the house or the inheritance. She wanted everything secured for her biological son. And my father, who was too weak to ever admit his own financial failings, eagerly swallowed her narrative. It was far easier to believe his older son was a lazy freeloader than to admit his older son was the only reason he wasn't sleeping in his truck. The breaking point didn't come with a massive screaming match. It came with a quiet opportunity. My best friend and business partner, Nathan, had relocated to Colorado a year prior. Nathan knew exactly what I was dealing with. He had watched from afar as my family slowly bled me dry. One Tuesday afternoon, he called me with a firm, life-changing offer. He had secured the funding to expand our consulting firm. He needed a partner on the ground in Denver. He offered me equity, a massive salary increase, and a full relocation package. "Get out of there, Matt," Nathan told me through the phone, his voice dead serious. "They are going to drown you, and then they'll complain that your dead body is taking up too much space. Leave." I didn't argue with him. I knew he was absolutely right. But when you grow up in a toxic family system, Escaping isn't just about packing a bag. It requires precision. It requires strategy. I didn't tell a single soul in that house about the Colorado offer. I accepted it quietly. I signed the lease for a beautiful apartment in Denver online. Instead of getting angry at my family's constant disrespect, I got analytical. I opened a master Excel spreadsheet. I named the file the archive. For the next 2 weeks, I meticulously documented everything. I pulled 3 years of bank statements. I highlighted every single transfer to Bennett Custom Signage, every emergency payment to Wyatt, every utility bill for the commercial workshop, every Cash App transfer to Uncle Carter to keep his truck from getting repossessed, every dollar given to Elijah. I exported my entire email history. I saved the panicked emails my father sent me begging for help with bids. I saved the receipts for the payroll gaps I covered. I compiled all of it into a massive digital folder. I started moving my things into a cheap storage unit on the edge of town, taking a few items out every night while they were sleeping. Books one day, winter clothes the next. I was almost completely moved out when my father finally pulled the trigger. He walked into my room on a Thursday evening. He didn't knock. He stood in the doorway, puffing out his chest to look bigger. "I've been talking to Sarah," he said, using his stern, authoritative voice. "You're 30 years old, Matthew. It's time to be a man. You have 30 days to find a job and get out of my house. I'm done supporting you. I'm cutting you off." He looked at me, waiting for me to beg. He wanted me to cry. He wanted to feel powerful. I just looked up from my laptop, my face completely blank. "Okay," I said. "I'll be out by Saturday." He blinked, clearly thrown off by my lack of resistance. "Well, good. See that you are." I didn't wait 30 days. I was gone in 2. And before I left, I went into the company's financial portal. I permanently deleted my credit card information from the project management software. I removed my banking details from the utility accounts. I sent an email to Wyatt stating that I was no longer an authorized representative of the company, and all future orders must be paid in cash upfront by Robert Bennett. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't sabotage his business. I simply stopped being his invisible shield. The silence of the first 48 hours after the barbecue was heavy. My phone didn't ring once. They didn't call or text. They were basking in the warm glow of their perceived victory. They thought they had finally purged the dead weight from their lives. But entitlement is a dangerous, fragile illusion. It only lasts until the real world demands actual payment. The first domino fell on Monday morning at exactly 9:15 a.m. Mr. Lincoln, the strict city development director, sent an email directly to my father's inbox. Normally, those emails routed through a filter I had set up, coming straight to my laptop. Mr. Lincoln was fiercely rejecting the revised blueprints for a massive downtown signage project. The formatting was entirely wrong, the scale was off by 3 inches, and the safety compliance certificate was completely missing. Before I left, I would have caught this instantly. I would have quietly corrected the math, generated a new PDF, and replied to Mr. Lincoln within 5 minutes apologizing for the clerical glitch. My father would have never even known there was a problem. This time, my father received the email himself. He had absolutely no idea how to read the blueprint software. He didn't know where the compliance certificates were stored on the server. He was completely blind. 2 hours later, at 11:30 a.m., the second domino dropped. Dylan, the account representative for their primary project management software, tried to run the monthly subscription fee. My father ran his entire business through this specific software: client contacts, installation schedules, employee hours, blueprints. Everything was hosted on their cloud. Dylan's automated system pinged the credit card on file. It was declined, because I had logged in and removed my card on Friday night. The system automatically tried the backup card, my father's corporate card. It was maxed out. At 11:35 a.m., the software automatically locked the entire company out. Every single computer screen in my father's office suddenly went blank and displayed a giant red banner. Account suspended. Please update payment method. My father couldn't see his schedule for the week. He didn't know where his installers were supposed to be. He couldn't access client phone numbers. He was instantly paralyzed. I was sitting in a quiet coffee shop in Denver, looking at the snowy mountains through the window, sipping an iced latte. My phone buzzed on the table. It was an automated email notification from Dylan's software company, confirming the account suspension due to non-payment. I smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and swiped the notification away. The storm had officially made landfall. By Wednesday, the mild inconvenience of a software glitch had rapidly escalated into a full-blown operational panic. Julian, a veteran technician from the city power company, pulled his white service truck into the driveway of my father's commercial workshop. Julian wasn't there to read the meter. He was holding a bright orange disconnect notice attached to a clipboard. The electricity bill for the workshop, which powered the massive industrial printers, the metal cutters, and the welding equipment, was 60 days past due. I used to pay that bill quietly online on the 29th of every single month. Not anymore. Julian walked up to the side of the building, opened the gray metal box, and pulled the massive lever. The heavy machinery inside ground to a halt. The lights went dark. The hum of the workshop died instantly. Inside the dark, sweltering workshop, Aaron, the lead installer, finally lost his patience. It was Wednesday afternoon. Payday was the previous Friday. Aaron had been waiting 5 agonizing days for his check. My father had been dodging him all week, claiming the bank was processing a routine hold. Without the machines running, Aaron packed up his heavy leather tool belt. He walked into my father's office, slammed his hard hat down on the desk, and pointed a finger right in my father's face. "I have a baby at home, Robert. My wife needs groceries. If my salary isn't in my bank account by noon tomorrow, I'm taking my entire crew and walking across town to Cameron's shop. He's hiring, and he actually pays his guys." That afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed a name I hadn't seen pop up in days. Dad. I let it ring 3 times before I hit the green button. I didn't say hello. I just put the phone to my ear and listened. "Matthew? Hey, buddy." My father's voice came through the speaker. It was thick with a fake, forced casualness. It was the exact smarmy voice he used when trying to smooth-talk an angry customer into accepting a delay. "Listen, son. Hope you're settling in wherever you are. Looks like we have a little administrative mix-up on this end. The utility company made a mistake, and the software guys locked us out. I think maybe your old card was tied to something and it glitched the system. Give me a call back when you get this so we can clear this up. Okay? Love you." A mix-up. A glitch. He was still desperately trying to protect his fragile ego. He couldn't even ask for help honestly. He had to frame the total collapse of his business as a technical error. I didn't say a single word. I tapped the red button, ended the call, and tossed my phone onto the couch. Let him sweat in the dark. Thursday was the day the pain finally trickled down from the business to the parasites living off it. When the host organism starts dying, the fleas are always the first to panic. My phone lit up with a voicemail notification. It was Uncle Carter. I hit play. Carter's voice was slightly slurred, but the loud, arrogant bravado from the barbecue patio was completely gone. He sounded terrified. "Matthew, Maddie, listen to me. The repo guy came by my apartment this morning. They're looking for the van. You gotta help me out, man. I know I said some stupid stuff at the party, but you know how I get when I'm drinking. It was just a joke. We're family. Just wire me $400 to keep them off my back until Monday. Please, man. I'm begging you." I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. 10 minutes later, a text message came in from Elijah. Elijah never called. He only texted when he wanted something, usually money. "Bro, WTF. My card declined at the bar last night. Dad says he's having cash flow issues and you locked him out of the accounts. Stop acting like a psycho and fix it. You're being cruel to the family over a stupid joke. Grow up. Cruel." The kid who literally threw a greasy hot dog at my face while cheering my eviction was calling me cruel. The absolute audacity of it was staggering. I didn't type out a long, emotional paragraph. I didn't try to explain myself or argue about respect. I opened my photo app, found a screenshot of a credit card statement from 2 months prior, and cropped it perfectly. It showed 3 separate charges: $800 to Elijah's luxury apartment complex for his rent, $450 to a designer shoe store, and $120 to a premium liquor store, all paid by my account. I sent the photo to Elijah with one single, sharp sentence: "Ask Dad to pay it this month." Elijah read the message instantly. The little red receipt popped up. He didn't reply. They were all suddenly waking up to the freezing cold reality of their situation. The magical money tree in the backyard hadn't died of natural causes. They had chopped it down themselves with their own arrogance. They had bitten the hand that fed them, and now they were starving. By Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after the barbecue from hell, the dam completely broke. My father was no longer trying to sound casual on his voicemails. The fake, customer service smile had melted entirely off his face. The reality of losing his business, his reputation, and his comfortable lifestyle had finally pierced his thick skull. Between 8 a.m. and 11 a.m., my father called my cell phone 6 times. I ignored the first 5. I sat at my kitchen island in Denver drinking coffee and listened to the voicemails pile up. The progression of his tone was a masterclass in panic and desperation. Call 1. Matthew, pick up the phone. This isn't funny anymore. Turn the software back on. Call 3. Matt, Aaron just quit. He packed his truck and walked out. You need to call me right now. Call 5. Matthew, Wyatt won't ship the acrylic for the Lincoln project. The deadline is Tuesday. Please, son. I need you. On the 6th call, I finally answered. Matthew, he gasped, breathing heavily into the receiver as if he had been sprinting. Thank God. Listen to me. Speak quickly, I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. Everything is locked, he yelled, raw panic vibrating in his throat. The power is off at the shop. The software is gone. Wyatt wants cash up front. I don't know the passwords. I don't know how to fix the Lincoln blueprints. If this is a lesson, Matthew, fine. Lesson learned. You made your point. Now please, come back to the shop and turn the systems back on. I'm begging you. I am begging you, son. He finally said it. He was begging. The man who proudly wore the boss of the grill apron while letting his family humiliate me publicly was now reduced to a trembling, desperate voice on a cell phone. I'm not coming to the shop, I said calmly. Matthew, please, you can't do this to me. Monday at noon, I interrupted, cutting off his pleading. The diner off Highway 9. Bring Carter. If you are 1 single minute late, I leave, and you can figure out your bankruptcy on your own. I hung up the phone before he could say another word. Monday morning in Denver, I woke up early. I didn't feel anxious or nervous. I felt incredibly focused, like a surgeon preparing for a very precise, high-stakes operation. I drove down to a local commercial print shop. I handed the clerk a thumb drive containing the archive. I asked him to print the entire document on high-quality, heavy-stock paper. I asked him to bind it professionally with a black spiral coil and a thick, clear plastic cover. When he handed it back to me across the counter, it felt heavy and substantial in my hands. 31 pages of undeniable, irrefutable truth. I flew back to my hometown on a quick morning flight. I rented a car at the airport and drove straight to the diner off Highway 9. It was a rundown, grease-stained place where cross-country truckers stopped for cheap coffee and heavy breakfasts. It was the absolute perfect place for this meeting. No fancy tablecloths. No pretentious atmosphere. No audience for my father to perform for. I arrived 15 minutes early. I ordered a black coffee and slid into a vinyl booth in the far back corner, positioning myself so I was facing the front door. I placed the 31-page bound packet on the table in front of me, perfectly squared to the edges of the table. At exactly 11:58 a.m., the little brass bell above the diner door jingled. My father and Uncle Carter walked in. The visual contrast from the barbecue just 9 days prior was staggering. At the party, they looked vibrant, loud, and invincible. Today, they looked like they had aged 5 years in a single week. My father was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt that looked like it had been pulled from a laundry basket. He hadn't shaved. There were dark, heavy bags under his eyes. Carter looked even worse. He was shaking slightly, completely sober, and looking physically ill from the intense stress of the repo men actively hunting him down. They spotted me in the back corner. They walked over slowly, their shoulders slumped, like men approaching an executioner. Neither of them spoke a word of greeting. They slid silently into the booth across from me. The waitress came over, popped her chewing gum, and asked if they wanted coffee. My father just waved her away without even looking at her. He looked at me. He tried to straighten his posture, desperately attempting to summon some of his old, patriarchal authority from deep within. "All right, Matthew," my father said, his voice raspy and exhausted. "You've had your fun. You've made us sweat. Now, what's it going to take to get you to unlock the accounts and get back to work?" He was still doing it. He still thought this was a standard business negotiation. He genuinely thought I was just throwing a tantrum for a higher salary or a forced apology. I didn't say a word. I didn't frown. I simply reached forward, placed my hand flat on the clear plastic cover, and slid the 31-page bound packet across the table. The heavy packet slid across the sticky Formica table and bumped gently against my father's knuckles. "What is this?" he asked, looking down at the clear plastic cover as if it were a live grenade. "Open it," I said softly, leaning back in my booth. Carter leaned in, his bloodshot eyes squinting hard at the first page through the plastic cover. My father flipped open the cover. The very first page was a summary sheet. I had kept it incredibly simple and devastatingly clear. Bold, black text on bright white paper. It was a master ledger. Total financial support rendered by Matthew Bennett, 36 months company expenses. Software, supplies, payroll $74,500 utility/property protection. $12,300 direct family assistance. Carter, Elijah $25,200 total. $112,000. My father stared at the bold number at the bottom of the page. He blinked hard, rubbing his eyes as if the ink was playing malicious tricks on him. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The color completely drained from his face. "That's a lie," Carter whispered defensively, wiping his mouth with the back of his trembling hand. "There's no way you had that kind of money. You were just sitting on your computer." "Turn the page," I instructed coldly. My father turned the page. Page 2 was the Aaron incident. It showed the side-by-side bank transfers. My freelance income hitting my personal checking account, and the exact same amount leaving my account to pay his lead installer, complete with a printed screenshot of the text message from my father saying, "Bank messed up payroll again. Tell the guys to hold tight." His hands started to shake. He turned another page. The Wyatt files. Long email threads where Wyatt aggressively threatened to sue the company, followed immediately by my personal credit card receipts paying down the massive debt so raw materials would keep flowing to the shop. He turned another page. Screenshots of Elijah's texts begging for money for designer clothes, side by side with Sarah's texts to my father demanding I be kicked out of the house. "This is..." My father started, his voice trembling so badly he couldn't finish the sentence. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of absolute terror and profound shame. "I didn't know, Matthew. I swear to God I didn't know it was this much." "You didn't want to know," I corrected him, my voice cutting through the ambient diner noise like a scalpel. "You wanted the prestige of being a successful business owner without the actual responsibility of running a business. You wanted to be the generous, providing father to Elijah without actually footing the bill. You let Sarah whisper poison in your ear because it was easier to blame me than look in the mirror and realize you were bankrupt." Carter slammed his hand flat on the table, trying to muster some fake outrage. "We're family, Matthew. You don't keep score with family. You don't hand your father an invoice." I turned my gaze slowly to Carter. The silence that followed was suffocating. "We're family, Matthew. You don't keep score with family. You don't hand your father an invoice." I turned my gaze slowly away from my father and looked directly at Uncle Carter. The silence that followed his outburst was suffocating. The diner around us continued its low hum of clinking coffee cups and frying bacon. But at our table, the air had turned to solid ice. Carter was sweating through his collar. He had both hands pressed flat against the sticky Formica table, trying his absolute hardest to look intimidating. It was a pathetic display from a man who had spent his entire adult life running away from his own responsibilities, including the custody of his own children. "You're right, Carter," I said. My voice was dangerously calm, barely above a whisper, but it carried enough weight to make him flinch. Family doesn't keep score. Parasites keep score. Family builds a life together. You people didn't build. You just extracted. I reached across the table, grabbed the thick plastic cover of the binder, and flipped it past the utility bills, past the supplier invoices, straight to page 12. I tapped my index finger hard against a highlighted column of bank transfers. The bright yellow marker practically glowed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner. "Let's talk about family, Dad," I said, locking my eyes with my father's wide, terrified stare. "Let's talk about your golden boy. Let's talk about Elijah." My father swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. He looked completely cornered. "Leave your brother out of this, Matthew. He's young. He makes mistakes. I set up that massive college fund for him, and yes, he blew it on foolish things, but he's trying to find his way in the world. He just needs time." "He found his way straight into your commercial checking account," I replied instantly. I pushed the heavy binder an inch closer to his chest. "Look at those line items, Robert. Read them. While you were screaming at me through my bedroom door, calling me a lazy 30-year-old failure, your youngest son was doing a whole lot more than just texting me for bar money. He copied the routing and account numbers from the business checking account. He linked them directly to his digital wallet on his phone. Those charges you see right there, those aren't company supplies. That $800 was for a VIP table at a downtown nightclub. That $3,000 was for a weekend trip to Vegas with his frat brothers. That is $12,000 in unauthorized, fraudulent withdrawals over the last 6 months alone." My father's eyes darted frantically across the page. His jaw physically dropped. He reached into his wrinkled shirt pocket, fumbling blindly for his reading glasses. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped them on the floor. He shoved the glasses onto his face and leaned in, his nose inches from the paper. "No," he whispered. The denial was automatic, a defense mechanism he had perfected over decades. "No, the bookkeeper told me those were vendor fees. She said those were Wyatt's late fees. The bookkeeper quit because you absolutely refused to listen to her." I corrected him, my voice completely stripped of any sympathy. "She tried to warn you, and you yelled at her for questioning your son. I am the one who covered those massive cash shortages with my own salary from my freelance clients so your payroll wouldn't bounce on Friday mornings. Elijah has been actively stealing from you, bleeding your company dry, and you were too busy bragging at the country club to even notice your own bank statements." Carter leaned back in the vinyl booth. The fake outrage vanished from his face, replaced by a stunned, sickening realization. "But wait," I said, flipping the heavy pages to section 3. "It actually gets much better. Let's look at the real reason you decided to kick me out of the house." I presented a printed transcript of text messages. They were messages between my father and his wife, Sarah. Because I had managed the company's corporate phone plan to save him money, I had full administrative access to the data logs. Sarah didn't want me out because she thought I needed a wake-up call or tough love. I read aloud, tracing the text with my finger so he could follow along. Quote, "Robert, if Matthew stays in this house much longer, he's going to claim a legal stake in the business. We need to get him out before he tries to take Elijah's inheritance. Tell him he's 30 and a complete loser. Break his confidence so he leaves quietly and doesn't ask for a dime. We need his room for Elijah's streaming studio anyway." Unquote. My father looked like he had been physically struck in the stomach by a heavyweight fighter. All the air instantly left his lungs. He stared at the printed texts, He knew exactly when she had sent them. He remembered the exact conversations they had shared in their pristine kitchen while I was down the hall, awake at 2 a.m., fixing his broken contracts. You let your wife manipulate you into throwing away the only person who was actually keeping the lights on, I said. You threw me away to protect an inheritance that doesn't even exist anymore. Because without my money acting as your safety net, your company is worth zero. My father tried desperately to salvage whatever tiny, fragmented scrap of pride he had left. It was a pure, unfiltered reflex. He had spent his entire adult life bullying his employees, his contractors, and his family into submission. He simply didn't know how to stop fighting, even when he was already dead in the water. He took off his reading glasses and slammed them onto the table. The plastic frames rattled against the wood. "Fine!" he shouted, a sudden burst of panicked anger flashing across his face. "Fine, Matthew. You paid some bills. You caught Elijah stealing. You're a financial genius. But you were still living under my roof. I fed you. I clothed you when you were a kid. You were a 30-year-old man hiding from the world because Chloe canceled your wedding and you couldn't handle the rejection. You still freeloaded off me. Shelter costs money, Matthew. You owed me respect." He was shouting loudly now. A few truckers sitting at the front counter turned their heads to stare at our booth. The waitress stopped wiping down a table and looked over, her eyes wide. I didn't care. Let them look. Let them hear every single word. I reached inside the breast pocket of my jacket. I didn't pull out another spreadsheet. I didn't pull out a bank statement. I pulled out a single photograph printed on high-quality, glossy photo paper. I tossed it effortlessly onto the center of the table, letting it land right on top of the financial binder. It was the photo from the barbecue. The image was crystal clear. The massive, aggressive red banner stretched across the garage. "Goodbye, Freeloader. Don't come back." My father standing at the grill in his ridiculous apron, smiling like a triumphant king. Elijah midlaugh, his arms still raised from throwing the hot dog at my windshield. Carter holding his cheap beer high in the air, his face red and sweaty. The neighbor kids pointing. The absolute, undeniable cruelty of my family, captured in high definition. "Look at it," I commanded. My tone left absolutely no room for argument. My father looked down at the photo. The bright red letters glared violently back at him. His chest heaved up and down. "When I lived in your house," I started, my voice rising just enough to cut through his delusions and ring clearly across the diner. "Working until 3 in the morning to fix your broken contracts, sacrificing my own sleep, my own money, and my own peace of mind. You called it freeloading. You told the entire neighborhood I was a lazy parasite. You let them pity you." I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table, closing the physical distance between us. "But when you lived off my money for 3 entire years," I continued, emphasizing every single syllable. "When I paid your insurance so you wouldn't get sued. When I paid Aaron's salary so he could feed his newborn baby. When I paid Wyatt so you actually had materials to build your signs. You called it family. You called it helping out. You stood under that massive sign last Saturday and you let everyone laugh at me. You let them humiliate me in the street, while my money was sitting in your bank account keeping you out of bankruptcy court." Carter looked down at his lap. He couldn't even look at the picture. He looked completely sick to his stomach. "I was never the freeloader," I stated clearly, letting the absolute truth hang in the air. "I was your landlord. I was your bank. I was your operations manager. I was the hidden payroll. I was the only thing standing between you and total catastrophic ruin. And your greatest mistake wasn't stealing from me. Your greatest mistake was throwing a public party to celebrate getting rid of the only person who actually cared if you survived." My father reached out and touched the edge of the glossy photograph. His thick, calloused fingers were trembling violently. The reality of his arrogance had finally crushed him. The absolute, staggering stupidity of his own actions was staring him right in the face. He had built a guillotine, placed his own head inside it, and cheered while he cut the rope. The fight completely left his body. It was like watching a balloon deflate in real time. His shoulders slumped forward heavily. He suddenly looked like a very old, very tired, incredibly small man. The patriarchal mask of authority he had worn for 30 years shattered into a million unfixable pieces right there on the diner floor. "Matthew," he choked out. His voice was broken. Tears finally welled up in his eyes, spilling over his bottom eyelids and tracking down his rough cheeks. "I'm sorry. I was blind. I was an absolute fool. Sarah was in my ear every single night, and the business was stressing me out, and the numbers weren't making sense, and I just took it out on you. I took you for granted. You're my son. Please." He reached his hand across the table, desperately trying to grab my forearm. I smoothly pulled my arm back, resting my hands in my lap, completely out of his reach. I felt absolutely nothing for him. No pity, no anger, just a profound, quiet emptiness. "Please," he begged, crying openly now, uncaring of the people watching us. "Wyatt won't send the raw materials. Aaron is gone. The software is completely locked and Dylan won't return my calls. If I don't finish the Lincoln project, I will lose the business. And if I lose the business, the bank will take the house. I will lose everything. Remember your mother, Matthew. Think about her. At her funeral, I stood by her casket and I promised I would keep this family together. She would want us to fix this. She would want you to forgive me. Come back to the shop. I'll pay you a real salary this time. We can fix this together. Please, son." Using my dead mother was the absolute lowest, most disgusting tactic he could have possibly deployed. He thought mentioning her funeral would crack my armor. He thought the memory of her would force me back into submission. It didn't warm my heart, turned my blood to absolute ice. "My mother would be deeply ashamed of the man you became," I said coldly. "She would hate that her son was publicly humiliated by the people who were secretly living off his labor." I reached into my pocket one last time. I pulled out a crisp white business card. I slid it across the table, stopping right over the photograph of the barbecue. "What is this?" my father asked, wiping his eyes with the back of his sleeve, staring at the card. "His name is Christian," I said, sliding out of the vinyl booth and standing up to my full height. "He is a very aggressive, very effective corporate bankruptcy lawyer. I highly suggest you call him today. Because by Friday, the city is going to officially sue you for breach of contract on the Lincoln project, and Wyatt is going to send your outstanding debt to a collections agency." "Matthew, wait!" Carter yelled, suddenly standing up, grabbing the edge of the table in a panic. "You can't just leave us like this. We don't know how to run the systems. What are we supposed to do?" I looked at Carter, then down at my father. "I already left," I said. "You hung a giant sign over your garage telling me not to come back. I'm just following your directions." I didn't wait for another response. I turned my back on them and walked straight toward the exit. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the diner. The bright, blinding midday sun hit my face. The hot wind blew across the parking lot. I walked to my rental car, got in, and started the engine. As I pulled onto the highway heading back to the airport, I felt a massive, suffocating weight lift entirely off my chest. For the first time in 3 long, agonizing years, I could finally breathe deeply. I was free. The collapse of Bennett custom signage did not happen slowly. It did not fade away quietly over the course of a few months. It happened with the terrifying, violent speed of a controlled building demolition. Once the hidden support beams were removed, gravity simply took over. By Tuesday afternoon, the day after our diner meeting, Wyatt officially cut off all credit. He didn't even call my father. He just sent a certified legal letter demanding immediate payment of $22,000 in past due invoices. Without the large sheets of acrylic, the vinyl rolls, and the heavy-duty aluminum framing, the shop floor was completely paralyzed. The few remaining workers who had shown up on Monday packed up their tools, threw them into the back of their pickup trucks, and walked out for good by Wednesday morning. The massive workshop went entirely silent. But the final, fatal nail in the coffin came directly from Mr. Lincoln. My father desperately drove down to the city planning office on Thursday morning. He wore his best suit, the one he usually reserved for church and funerals, trying to project an image of stability. He tried to beg Mr. Lincoln for a 2-week extension on the project deadlines. He tried to blame the sudden delays on a massive computer failure, a supply chain issue, and unreliable employees. Mr. Lincoln wasn't buying a single word of it. He was a sharp, meticulous man who despised excuses. He called my father into his large, glass-walled office. I know exactly how this entire conversation went down because Aaron, my father's former lead installer, happened to be sitting in the lobby right outside. Aaron was there interviewing for a secure, unionized job with the city maintenance department, and he heard the entire confrontation through the open office door. "I don't care about your supposed computer glitches, Robert," Mr. Lincoln said firmly, his voice echoing into the hallway. "I care about competence. I care about results. And it has become abundantly clear to me over the last week that the only competent person in your entire operation was your son, Matthew." My father tried to interject, but Mr. Lincoln cut him off instantly. "Matthew is the one who called my office late at night to verify permit numbers," Mr. Lincoln continued ruthlessly. "He's the one who caught the massive zoning errors in your initial blueprints. When Matthew sent me a professional email last Friday stating he was no longer associated with your firm and advising me to seek direct contact with you, I knew this project was dead in the water. You don't know the first thing about the compliance codes for this installation." My father stood there in his expensive suit, completely humiliated, stripped of every illusion of grandeur he possessed. "I am officially canceling the city contract, Robert," Mr. Lincoln declared, his tone final. "I am reassigning the bid to Cameron's firm across town. I would rather hire a total amateur out of a residential garage than work with a fraud who takes all the credit for his son's late-night labor. Get out of my office." By Friday afternoon, the primary bank froze all of the company's checking and savings accounts due to suspicious overdrafts and missed loan payments. The large metal doors to the commercial workshop were officially padlocked by the property landlord on Monday morning. 20 long years of business, built on a foundation of ego and maintained by my hidden sacrifice, was completely wiped out in exactly 14 days. All because a man couldn't handle his own pride. When a highly toxic family system suddenly loses its primary scapegoat, the poison has absolutely nowhere else to go but inward. They can no longer bond over their shared hatred or mockery of the victim. Stripped of my money and my labor, the wolves immediately turned around and started biting each other. My father drove home from the padlocked workshop, his life in ruins, and immediately confronted Elijah about the stolen money from the corporate accounts. For the very first time in his 22 years of life, the golden child did not get his way. My father demanded the $12,000 back immediately to pay the lawyers. Elijah, cornered and defensive, laughed directly in his father's face. He told my father he was a pathetic, failed businessman who couldn't even keep the lights on, threw his sports car keys at my father's chest, and stormed out. My father physically locked the doors, kicking his precious golden child out onto the street. Sarah, realizing the magical money tree was dead, did not stick around to play the role of the supportive, loving wife. The massive inheritance she had spent years plotting and whispering for was now just a terrifying mountain of commercial debt. She filed for divorce less than 3 weeks later. She hired a completely ruthless family lawyer and tried to aggressively claim half the total value of the house, half the vehicles and alimony. She spent thousands of dollars in legal fees fighting a vicious court battle over a house that was actively in the process of being foreclosed on by the bank. They absolutely destroyed each other in mandatory mediation sessions, screaming across conference tables, fighting bitterly over broken living room furniture, flat-screen televisions, and leased vehicles that were about to be repossessed anyway. Their marriage, built entirely on convenience and shared cruelty, collapsed under the weight of actual adversity. Uncle Carter didn't fare any better. Without me there to quietly float his rent payments, and without my father's company to hide his chronic daytime drinking under the guise of sales meetings, he was swiftly evicted from his apartment. He exhausted all his favors with his drinking buddies. The last I heard, He ended up sleeping on a stained couch in the basement of a guy he met at a dive bar, completely cut off from the rest of the fractured family. By late summer, the giant suburban house where they threw that barbecue was listed by the bank as a short sale. It sold well below the asking price to a young couple from out of state. I looked up the public property records online one evening. It was a brutally neat, clinical end to the chaos. The driveway where Elijah had thrown the hot dog at my car was power-washed. The two-car garage where they had proudly hung that massive red banner of humiliation was completely empty, swept clean of 20 years of history. They had systematically pushed me out to secure their kingdom, and in doing so, they burned the entire castle straight to the ground. They lost absolutely everything. 6 months later, my life looked entirely, unbelievably different. The contrast was so sharp it sometimes felt like I had woken up in another dimension. The move to Colorado had truly saved me. Nathan and I officially launched our logistics and operations consulting firm. We called it Peak Solutions. We didn't wear hard hats, we didn't do physical labor, and we didn't pretend to. We sat in clean, quiet offices and fixed broken administrative systems for massive regional contractors who desperately needed our help. We brought order to their chaos. Within our first 4 months of operation, we aggressively pitched and secured a massive, multi-year contract with the state government to manage their infrastructure bidding process. Because I had spent 3 years mastering the intricacies of municipal codes while saving my father's business, I was uniquely qualified for the role. I received a massive promotion within our own company structure, securing a salary that was pulling in more revenue in a single month than my father's shop had generated in an entire year. I wasn't hiding in a dark, childhood bedroom anymore, terrified of the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I bought a beautiful, spacious condo right outside of Denver. It had huge, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the snow-capped Rocky Mountains. I bought a brand-new, reliable truck, and I paid for the entire thing in cash. No loans, no debt, no strings attached to anyone. But the absolute best part of my new life wasn't the money in the bank. It wasn't the promotion, the nice truck, or the respect I commanded from my high-level clients. The best part was the absolute, profound silence of my home. When I came home from a long day at the firm and unlocked my front door, there was no screaming echoing from the kitchen. There were no manipulative, venomous whispers drifting down the hallway. There were no panicked, late-night text messages demanding emergency bailouts to stop a repo man. I learned what cooking dinner actually tasted like when you weren't physically bracing yourself for an emotional attack. I learned how to sleep through the night without grinding my teeth. I was finally truly healing. Toxic families train your nervous system to constantly expect a crisis. Learning to trust the calm takes time, but the peace I found in Colorado was the greatest reward I could have ever asked for. I truly thought I would never hear from any of them again. I had changed my personal email address and blocked all their numbers on my phone. But about 8 months after that tense meeting at the diner, a strange, unknown number with an Arizona area code popped up on my phone screen. I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset. I answered it cautiously, my guard instantly going up. Matthew speaking. There was a long, shaky exhale on the other end of the line. Matt? It's Elijah. My stomach tightened. I almost hung up the phone immediately. My thumb hovered directly over the red button. The memories of the barbecue flashed in my mind. What do you want, Elijah? If you're looking for cash, you called the wrong number. I don't have any money for you. I don't want money. His voice sounded remarkably different. It was quieter, stripped of all the arrogance. The loud, frat boy swagger was completely gone. I swear to God, Matt, please don't hang up. I leaned back in my patio chair, staring at the mountains. You have exactly 2 minutes. Talk. He took another deep, ragged breath. I'm in a residential rehab program down in Arizona. Mom kicked me out of the apartment after the divorce started getting really ugly. Dad won't even speak to me. I hit rock bottom pretty hard. I got a job stocking shelves at a local grocery store on the night shift just to pay for a tiny room at a halfway house. It's really hard, Matt. He paused. He was waiting for me to step in. He was waiting for the older brother to offer to rescue him, to wire him $1,000 to make the pain go away. I stayed completely silent. I didn't offer a single word of comfort. I'm calling because part of my recovery program involves making direct amends. Elijah continued, his voice cracking slightly with genuine emotion. I was horrible to you. I threw that food at your car. I sent you those awful, disrespectful texts. I stole from the company, took your money, and I mocked you behind your back because putting you down was the only way I knew how to feel important. But you were the only one holding us all up. I see that now. I'm sorry, Matt. I'm really, really sorry for the way I treated you. I listened to his breathing on the line. I realized in that exact moment, listening to him struggle to find the words, that I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't feel anger. He was just a kid who was raised by a deeply flawed monster and a selfish manipulator. He had been trained to be cruel, and now he was paying the ultimate price for his education. Thank you for the apology, Elijah, I said softly, my voice calm. I appreciate you taking the time to say it. Keep doing the work. Stay sober. It's a long road. Are you ever going to come back to visit? He asked, a hint of childlike hope in his voice. No, I said honestly, drawing an unbreakable boundary. I'm never coming back, but I genuinely wish you the best in your recovery. I ended the call. I didn't invite him to Denver. I didn't offer to pay his rent at the halfway house. Forgiving someone in your heart doesn't mean you have to open the door and let them back into your life. A few weeks after Elijah's unexpected phone call, I went down to the lobby of my condo building to check my mail. Tucked far into the back of my metal locker was a small, battered cardboard box. It was wrapped heavily in packing tape. There was no return address written on the outside, just a faded postmark from my old hometown. I carried the box upstairs to my kitchen counter, grabbed a sharp knife from the block, and carefully sliced through the tape. I pulled back the cardboard flaps. Inside, wrapped in a layer of old newspaper, was a vintage, scuffed wooden recipe box. My heart instantly skipped a beat in my chest. It was my mother's recipe box, the exact same one she used to keep sitting on the kitchen counter when I was a little boy. I had desperately searched the entire house for it before I moved out to Colorado, turning over every drawer, but I couldn't find it. Sarah had hidden it away in a dusty box in the attic years ago because she hated looking at anything that reminded my father of his first wife. I gently lifted the wooden lid. The hinges creaked slightly. It was filled to the brim with my mother's old, stained index cards, her famous spicy chili, her homemade apple pie, her sloppy joes that we used to eat on Friday nights. Just seeing her familiar, looping handwriting brought a wave of warmth rushing through me. As I sifted through the cards, I noticed something at the very bottom of the box. Tucked underneath all the recipes was a small, neatly folded piece of white-lined paper. I opened it. It wasn't a long, multi-page letter. It wasn't a weeping, emotional apology from my father begging for custody of my emotions again. He wasn't asking to be a part of my new life. It was just a single, simple sentence written in my father's messy, unmistakable scrawl. You earned this, Dad. I stared at the note for a long time. It was the absolute closest thing to an admission of total defeat he would ever be capable of writing. He must have found the box in the attic while clearing out the house for the final bank foreclosure. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for a relationship. He didn't try to manipulate me. He just acknowledged the truth and sent it to me. I held the recipe card with my mother's handwriting in my hands, and for the first time in years, I smiled a genuine, completely unburdened smile. The war was officially over. I had won. I still have that photograph on my phone. I keep it saved in a hidden folder in my digital photo album. Sometimes, when I'm having an incredibly stressful day at the firm, when a massive client is being difficult, or when I feel a sudden wave of doubt creeping in, I open the folder and I look at it. I look at the giant red banner hanging over the garage. Goodbye, Freeloader. Don't come back. I look at Uncle Carter holding his cheap beer, sweating in the sun. I look at Elijah laughing, his arm caught mid-throw. I look at my father standing proudly at the grill, wearing his apron, utterly convinced he was the untouchable king of his suburban castle. When they posed for that picture, standing together in the driveway, they thought they were documenting my total, absolute humiliation. They thought they were taking a victory lap over a broken, useless man. They thought they were sending a message to the world about tough love. What they actually captured, without realizing it, was a profound tragedy. They captured the final, fleeting second of their own safety. They took a high-definition photograph of the very last moment they had a life vest, right before that life vest got into a Honda Civic and drove away forever. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty for letting the family business fail. The answer is no. I don't regret leaving. I don't regret walking into that diner and handing over that 31-page binder of evidence. My only regret in this entire story is that I stayed in that house long enough to confuse being used with being loved. Blood doesn't make a family. Respect does. Loyalty does. If someone only calls you family when they need your labor, your money, or your silence, they aren't protecting a relationship. They are protecting a system of exploitation. And the day I walked away from them was the exact day I finally became the man they swore I would never be. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. Sitting down, writing this all out, and sharing it with you has been a massive part of my healing process. I truly hope this resonated with you in some way, especially if you're dealing with difficult family dynamics. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation, giving absolutely everything you have to people who only know how to take? How did you finally break free? Let me know your experiences in the comments. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, you are part of an exclusive group. You are part of what I call the 1% Club. I want you to go down into the comments section right now and type the letter W. W stands for winner. That is our secret signal to recognize the amazing, resilient people who stuck through this entire emotional journey with me. It shows me that you are someone who understands that surviving a toxic environment makes you a winner. Please take a second to hit that like button, click subscribe, and follow along so we can keep sharing these powerful stories together. Until next time, take care of yourselves, set your boundaries like concrete, and never let anyone call you a freeloader in your own life.